Welcome to Conservation Conversations, the podcast where we discuss emerging technologies, global trends, and the future of biodiversity conservation with some of the world's leading experts. I'm your host, Sean O'Brien, President and CEO of NatureServe, where we've been working for 50 years to protect endangered species and ecosystems. With this podcast, we want to introduce our audience to some of today's key players in conservation and share the amazing work being done around the globe to protect our planet's rich biodiversity. All right, welcome to this month's Conservation Conversation with me, Sean O'Brien. I'm here today with Carrie Brown-Lima, who's the director of the New York Invasive Species Research Institute. The Institute works to integrate invasive species science and management to establish clear conservation objectives related to invasive species, which we're going to find out very soon why that's so important. And they work to improve effective invasive species control efforts. Carrie has been working for nearly 25 years in natural resource conservation and management across ecosystems and across borders, meaning that she's worked on these issues outside of the United States. And in fact, prior to her position with the Research Institute, Carrie spent over a decade promoting conservation strategies and partnerships in Brazil and throughout Latin America, which I think is really exciting. And Carrie's on a number of boards at the state level and at the national level, including the North American Invasive Species Management Association Board of Directors. So Carrie, welcome to Conservation Conversations.
Hi, Sean. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's of course my pleasure to have you here. So of course, the most obvious first question, what's an invasive species and why should we care about them? It's fairly open-ended there for you.
Great. Well, that's a good way to kick it off. So an invasive species is a species that comes from another place that was brought and introduced into a new location, usually by human causes. And once it becomes established, it causes some sort of harm, whether it's ecological, economic, or human health. So it's non-native and does bad things.
So that's interesting. So the does bad things part is what's interesting there, because we also talk about naturalized species. So what's sort of the difference and what's an example of that?
Yeah, so we have naturalized species everywhere, and we use a lot of those for our own purposes. And I left one part of the definition off of the invasive species, is that it has to do more harm than good to be considered an invasive species. So a lot of our naturalized species, I know you've mentioned honeybees in the past, or rice that we're growing. These are species that come from other places that we've planted or cultivated or even just released into the environment, but they don't cause any harm that's greater than the good they cause. So we get food from a lot of our naturalized species. We get enjoyment out of them, and they're not usually becoming those big bullies of the environment where they're taking over. So that's where we draw the line between what's just naturalized and non-native and what is an invasive species.
So on the invasive front, right, so we talked about honeybees as a great example of a naturalized species that definitely does more good than bad. But what's an example or a couple examples of invasive species that people might be aware of? Or, some are in the South where I am, right? Kudzu is a pretty obvious one. But are there others that are sort of really a big problem?
Yeah, so here in New York, some of our worst invasive species, the ones that we can really see a large impact on our economy and on our environment, are invasive forest pests. I'm sure many people have heard of the emerald ash borer that was introduced from Asia. It pretty much wipes out ash trees, which are a big part of our forests here and across the Midwest as well. And so basically, thanks to the emerald ash borer, we are on the route to losing all of our native ash species. And so that's going to have an impact not only on our forest composition, on our yards where we have trees that have been planted there for decades, and also on the economy, as ash is an important wood that we depend on.
It's incredible to think that could happen with ash trees. And this is not the first time that we've completely changed the composition of our forest because of an invasive species. I'm thinking of the chestnut blight.
Exactly. Chestnuts, it's hard to believe because we don't really see them. They're pretty much ecologically extinct right now. We would only find an individual here or there, a small one. But that actually at one point was part of our culture, and that was part of our forest composition, and now it's gone.
Yeah, it's really quite astounding. So I'm curious, like, what got you interested in working on invasive species? Was there some event or person or some ecosystem that was affected that you loved? What was the inspiration?
So really my career goals have been always to work with conservation, to protect biodiversity, to protect beautiful places, and to protect those species that are rare and are interesting, or just, the overall biodiversity, not just the rare and interesting ones, but the ones that make up a part of all these beautiful places that we love. And when you look at some of the top threats to biodiversity, invasive species is threat number 2 after habitat destruction. And so it's really important for us, for those of us who care about conservation of the environment, to care about invasive species. And that's not even including the human health and the economic impacts that come along with their introduction.
So I want to go back to that and emphasize that point. In terms of threats to ecosystems and species, the number 2 threat is invasive species. So how does that measured, and how does that work?
Well, I don't know exactly how it all gets calculated. I'm pulling that from the textbooks, but yeah, it's now we have climate change too, so that's really changing our habitats and our ecosystems, and changing the composition of the species that can survive in certain places. And so, I'm not sure how that weighs in the ranks, but invasive species is definitely up there.
It definitely is. And it's one of the things when you think about threats to habitats and you think, okay, right, obvious things like clearing the land or huge development projects seems like an obvious one. And now with the climate emergency, the changes in climate making a big difference. But invasive species being right up there in the top is really important. And it goes back, like you're saying, with the emerald ash borer and the chestnut blight and woolly adelgids and all of these things that are radically changing the habitats that other species depend on, right? So if all of the ash trees in the forest died, that's going to affect other animals, other invertebrates, potentially other plants that depend on certain habitats that the ash trees may make the forest be more like. And so it really is important. And I don't think invasive species get the respect that they deserve in terms of their negative impact.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think there's always new issues coming up. I know climate change is a big one that we all need to act on, immediately. And so it's hard to keep all of these bad issues on the front of our to-do list. But
so when it comes to controlling invasive species, since we know now that we need to do that, obviously there's so many different kinds, right? There's plants and insects and other fungus and various things that could be invasive. So control methods are going to be pretty variable. But what are some examples of control methods that have been successful in the past with some invasives that were a problem?
Yeah, so, invasive species, starting as we're thinking about controlling them, we really want to try to control them when their populations are small. Because once they become spread across the landscape, that is such a big problem and such an expensive problem that it's really hard to get rid of them altogether. So, our strategies, actually, our first strategy would be to keep them out to begin with. And there's a lot of policies in place that try to keep us from bringing species in that could potentially become invasive, or from moving them around to be introduced into new places. Then the second best option is to get rid of them while they're small populations, but clearly that's not always easy to find. And so we often don't discover them till they're more widespread and having an impact. And then once they're spread across, the landscape, we use chemicals, say, for example, to get rid of plants. We can use manual removal methods to, pull things out that we don't want, or whether remove fish or from a lake. However, that gets a little tricky, because how can you get them all? And if they're great reproducers, that's one of the things about invasive species that make them invasive, is that when they become established in their new environment, their populations grow out of control, and they don't have a lot to keep their populations down. So one of the methods that we can use on a wider spread scale is called biological control. And that's where we introduce a native, a predator that's from the species native range. So when I'm saying predator, I'm thinking of like a herbivore insect that would eat a plant. We can actually be successful at long-term suppression of a population, because that's why a lot of these species that are invasive in their introduced environments, some of them are even rare in their native range. And so it's really the lack of having these native enemies, these natural enemies that allowed their populations to grow out of control. And of course, I know that can raise red flags for some people, because they thought, oh, wow, we're introducing another invasive species. And I think maybe in the past, people weren't as careful about what they do, but there's so many regulations and procedures in place. And it's actually like over a decade of testing for some of these species before they can be introduced as a biological control agent into the United States or into most countries. So, there's gone are the days of introducing like a generalist predator that's going to eat all the bird eggs, but now we're really thinking about things that are very host specific, that only will feed on that one plant and won't be able to survive on anything else. So that's one of our, I would say, longer term solutions. Obviously, we've got more technology coming out now, where people are starting to think of genetic engineering as a way to stop species from spreading at such a rate and reduce their population growth.
There's the genetic engineering of invasive species and some sort of gene drive to whatever, make them infertile or something, is really exciting, but also, it's scary to the general public, but it's a very, very exciting possibility. The other thing that I think is exciting about what you were talking about is these biological controls that are highly researched and really carefully done allow us to not have to introduce more pesticides or herbicides into the environment to try and control these species, which sounds much better in the long run.
Yeah, when these programs are successful, some of the species that actually used to be huge problems are now like not even talked about anymore, because they don't go away completely, but their populations they act more like maybe a naturalized species that we spoke of, a species that's not native, but it's not, taking over and kicking out all the native species either.
Yeah, that's exciting. One of the tools that some places use when they're dealing with invasive species is actually a tool that NatureServe worked on with the New York Natural Heritage Program and other organizations, and that's called Imap Invasives, which allows people to gather data on invasive species in the field. And that sort of got me thinking about citizen science and crowdsourcing of information on invasive species. That is a new frontier in invasive species control, isn't it?
Yeah. So, in order to make these decisions about what are we going to control, where are we going to control it, we need to know where things are first. And, these things are growing and they're expanding across the landscape, and they're being introduced, they're being moved around by people and cropping up in new places. And so we've really depend on Imap Invasives here in New York State. That's our state database for invasive species, to start figuring out these species distributions. And it helps us to make better decisions. So we can think about where we're going to invest our limited resources, or we'll be able to send out alerts when a new species comes in. And so, Imap Invasives and having this data is really important. And also as we're, just trying to figure it all out and weigh our options, because there's so many invasive species and there's so many places we want to protect, and we need to make decisions, and we need data to make those decisions.
Yeah. you have a program in New York that is specifically designed to get average citizens involved in collecting data on invasive species? Is that right? Where they can like adopt an area or something?
Yeah, we do. So here in New York, we have Imap Invasives. There's an app on your phone. We do trainings for citizen scientists because a lot of the information we get, some of the biggest finds for new species being introduced came from citizens. And so, like I was saying, catching these species when they're new and when their populations are small is key. And so the more eyes we have out there on the ground, looking for things, documenting things, the better. So New York City has really invested a lot in training citizen scientists to get out there to know how to identify some of the species we're looking for and then record it. Just even on their iPhone, they're able to, record the geographic location, take a picture, so it can be verified by an expert. And this data is the data that we're using to help guide our decision making. So thank you to NatureServe for making that happen.
Well, we're happy to do it, of course, because we want to do everything we can to help conserve native biodiversity. And I think that's a really exciting program. And it's a really great outlet for people who are interested in nature and maybe they're not interested in birds or they want to participate in some way, which I think is really exciting. So thank you for having that cool program. Hopefully other people will adopt a similar program. I wanted to ask you, as we sort of start wrapping up here, about if you have any career goals, like what at the end of your career, if you look back and say, oh, that's that, because I was able to make that happen, or because I was able to be part of that, I've had a successful career. Do you have something like that out there?
So overall, one of the themes that has emerged throughout my career to date has been really this idea of coming up with strategies that can help us to conserve ecosystems and species. And so I've worked with sustainable fisheries, I've worked with sustainable agriculture, I've worked with protected areas, in Latin America, and now this work with invasive species. But the idea of coming up with strategies, but what's really key to those strategies is getting people to work together and come around a common cause. And so we all have our role to play. Different organizations, instead of working independently, if we can come together, our impact is so much greater. And so one of my career goals and my passions is really how can we get everybody at the table that needs to be there to make these things happen, coming up with the strategies. So if I feel like I could look back and say, what, I've created these new collaborations or these new strategies that are going to carry on, in the future and positively impact our ecosystems, that would feel like a success to me.
That's fantastic. And it sounds like you're doing that. I mean, with your work and the things that you've been doing in your career, it sounds like you've been actually pretty successful in putting in place some long-term strategies that are going to benefit society for a long time to come in nature. So thank you for that. Is there anything else you wanted to add or anything I forgot to ask you about today?
Well, usually what people ask me about is what people can do in their own lives to try to reduce invasive species impacts. And so, I know it's always great to take an opportunity to get the message out, in addition to collecting data and, contributing to databases like Imap Invasives that's hosted by NatureServe. We also really want people to be aware of their role in spreading species and also in stopping the spread species. And so we're really trying to promote things like clean, drain, and dry your boat before you move from one lake to another. One of the top ways invasive aquatic invasive species are spread is hitching a ride. We are the best vehicle to move these species around. And so, the more we can be aware of that, whether it's picking the dirt out of the bottom of our hiking boots when we move to a new location to go hiking, or not moving firewood that could have, invasive forest pests in it, like emerald ash borer, far distance from where its origins are. So, we can also stop moving them around and giving them this helping hand and making them a bigger problem moving forward. And also, the other thing, as we're planting our gardens, plant native species. We don't know, a lot of these invasives are actually, they seem innocent enough until the climate changes and it becomes nice and warm and they're able to grow out of control and become invasive. A lot of our invasive plants across the landscape actually came in, with the horticultural trade. So, just a few steps we can do on our own to start slowing the spread of some of these invasives. It's good to have that word out there.
I drove past a nursery the other day and the sign in front of it said all exotics. And I was like, whoa, how about the nursery that's just all native species that are going to be amazing and beautiful? Just because they're exotic doesn't mean they're more beautiful than our native species. That is definitely true.
Yeah. And, there's just studies out there that are showing that not only can we avoid them becoming invasive, but a lot of these native species are key to supporting native insect populations that then support native bird populations. And if you look at some of the introduced species that have no native insects on it, they also aren't great to support the food web. And so we can not only avoid further invasive species, but we can actually promote these mini ecosystems in our own yard to support wildlife. So.
Well, that's a great way to wrap up. I think encouraging the citizen scientists and encouraging activity by the citizen that's actually really quite straightforward. What you plant in your yard, not releasing pets into the wild, things like that. So I think that's excellent. And I think I really appreciate all that you're doing on invasive species, because it really is, it's not just in the textbooks you've been looking at, it's everywhere that you read lists of the main threats to biodiversity. It's, habitat loss, invasive species, climate change, those kinds of things. So absolutely, it's a huge, huge problem for the world. And so we appreciate all that you're doing to help.
Thank you. It's great to, as part of my, career goals of working together, it's great to have a partner like NatureServe out there. And I look forward to working with all your programs moving forward as well.
Great. Thank you, Carrie Brown-Lima, for your time today, and look forward to working with you more in the future. Thank you for joining us on Conservation Conversations today, and we'll look forward to talking to you again next month.